it's such a contradiction here, because Sepp Blatter is considered a bit of a hero because he bought us a World Cup in Africa. And a lot of people stick up for him and think he did a great job in getting football out to the smaller nations. I've been on several programs on the local TV stations where people are saying, well, look, he did give money and development potential to some of the smaller nations. But the news that there was actual corruption involved in the bid has been received with great shock, because we thought that the 2010 World Cup, after 2006, we narrowly missed out by a single abstention from Charles Dempsey of New Zealand. Everyone thought the 2010 World Cup bid was on the level and was fine. And the news that we gave $10 million for an Africa Diaspora Fund to Jack Warner has really shaken South Africa up, and there's been huge denials, Adam.
And what is the status of the facilities that were built for the 2010 World Cup? A number of stadia were built. It was supposed to bring trickle down, but isn't it right that quite a lot of those are not in use?
I'm afraid, Adam, that the World Cup, although it was seen as a great success here, and I think it was, I mean, I spent a lot of time saying it won't be crime-ridden, it won't be a problem to have a World Cup in South Africa, and it wasn't. It was a great World Cup. England were up at Sun City in the Phokeng region, and they had a great time here. They were denied by a dodgy goal. But the fact is, we sit here now with a lot of World Cup stadiums not very well used. Our local league are getting very low attendances at the moment. And there's a real feeling that actually FIFA made record profits out of South Africa, and we didn't actually do that well. They were able to move foreign currency in and out of the country without any checks or balances. There was no tax. They made billions out of this country, and yet South Africa now sits with a whole lot of big World Cup stadiums not being used very much, and a FIFA legacy fund that we can't really... They gave us 100 million. 10 million of that went to Jack Warner. 10 million went to building SAFA, South African Football Association House, near Soccer City, where the final was held. The rest of the money seems to have kind of dried up. And Jerome Falco, Danny Jordan, the guy that was very close to Jerome Falco during the World Cup, Irving Koza, the guy that runs local football, these guys are now being asked, well, what exactly happened to our great World Cup dividend? And there's a real revision of the South African World Cup taking place as I speak. But again, a great retention of faith and belief in Sepp Blatter that, you know, personally I don't share. But South Africa loves Sepp Blatter, and it's a shock to this country.
Do you think there will now be criminal investigations or inquiries in South Africa of what South African authorities got up to?
Well, I think, you know, South Africa has had several big corruption cases in the last couple of years involving the government. And so we have a situation where, you know, we have to look into it. Apparently, the local police force called the Hawks, the kind of specialist police that do the forensic investigations into corruption, are now aware of this and are now working on it. But you've got everyone from Sports Minister Fikile Mbalula upwards to President Jacob Zuma saying, oh, there was no problem. And I've got a classic picture and story of Jacob Zuma in 2009 meeting Jack Warner during the Confederations Cup and saying, South Africa owes you an eternal debt of gratitude. I think South Africa are guilty as charged, but simply did what they had to get the World Cup here, given the way FIFA works. So arrests, extradition, I don't know. I think you'll find the South African guys involved will simply be witnesses in the taking down of people like Sepp Blatter and Jack Warner.
Is there a feeling perhaps in South Africa that in the end corruption and bribes are the way things get done?
Yes, there definitely is. We've had some fantastic corruption scandals in this country. The building of a massive homestead for the president that isn't a government residence has been the latest one of those, where they've claimed the swimming pool was built purely to put the fires out in the local area. They've claimed that the chickens and cows that Jacob Zuma owns forced us to have a certain type of security fence and an amphitheatre built. So we love corruption in this country, and we love trying to bring it down, and we love trying to justify it. In this particular instance, I think that South Africa are justified in saying, yes, it was probably the $10 million that went to the Africa Diaspora Fund that no one had ever heard of before this came up. The idea is that we would fund football for people of African descent in the Caribbean, and yet we didn't fund any football for people in Africa itself. And South Africa could really do with $10 million being spent on grassroots football. I think that the South Africans are going to have to say in the end that they did what they had to do to get the World Cup. There's no sign of Jack Warner spending any of this money on an African diaspora football pitch or even a football kit. And I think ultimately we're going to realise that FIFA did play us and took a lot of money from South Africa without return. And I hope that no one here gets prosecuted, because really the motivation for that dreadful corruption came from Sepp Blatter, Jerome Falker and Jack Warner, the people that were kind of desperately kind of shifting votes and a lot of them voting for Morocco rather than South Africa. We had to do what we did in South Africa.